so glad you just talked about the consequences of having missed periods and how it just shuts down the entire body and not just your ability to perform at a high level in your sport, but just everyday life. It just is a disaster for everything, your physical and your mental health. And I want you to just kind of touch on what else can cause it. So you talked about the low energy availability, over exercising. What if a parent says, "Well, like, my girl seems healthy, like, she's managing her load, she hasn't lost a lot of weight," but are there other lifestyle factors we should be looking at?
hmm So first, I kind of want to speak to, well, my daughter doesn't look like she's malnourished, and that's something that I have heard before, and that stems from what we used to talk about as the female athlete triad. Now, the triad, we have updated this since 2013. We have an updated consensus statement that now is identifying what REDS is, so relative energy deficiency in sport. So that means that our energy availability is low. And this has been updated from the female athlete triad because in the triad, we used to say that body mass index or body fat percentage is going to really help us identify who's at risk. Problem is, with science, we get the new information and new things are constantly changing how we are able to look at things. So now we realize that actually females can have missing menstrual cycles, even if they are by BMI definition overweight. Their body fat percentage can actually be pretty high for this to happen. Your daughter does not need to look malnourished. I like to kind of give this comparison. Now, I am sure that we have many parents or moms out there listening that are like, oh, I've tried that diet and I feel like I'm eating absolutely nothing, but I can't seem to lose weight. And that's where it's like, well, yeah, your body is really smart. You decreased your calories way too fast. So it adapted, and your body is also in survival mode. So right now, your metabolic rate has slowed. Now, your metabolic rate isn't just digestion, it's the sum of all of your chemical reactions in your body. So that means things your body doesn't need to survive have now been down regulated. So that's going to occur with our female athletes. So they have a huge spike in training load, and they're not meeting that with enough fuel and enough recovery. They're going to see a down regulation of these systems, especially the menstrual cycle. So, your daughter absolutely does not need to be extremely thin or extremely malnourished to be someone that is experiencing REDS or an irregular menstrual cycle. So, that's really imperative. Now, when it comes down to what are the other factors? So, at the end of the day, we have to remember our body still is a system where calories in minus calories out equals whatever is left over. So, food intake is probably one of the most imperative concepts that we need to talk about when it comes to menstrual cycle irregularities. So, research shows that females that spend most of their day in a state of catabolism or not eating are at a much higher risk of experiencing this, even if you think that they're eating enough. So think of it this way: an athlete that's maybe eating 2 or 3 meals a day compared to an athlete that's eating 5 or 6 meals a day. If she's eating only 2 to 3 meals a day, she's fasting for a greater amount of time. That's stressful to the body. That's a catabolic state, meaning her body has to break down to give the fuel that she needs to perform whatever exercise task she's asking for it. So we see that if females actually increase their meal frequency throughout the day, one, they're going to be able to consume more food because you can only consume so much food in one setting. Your stomach can only expand so far. And if we increase that meal frequency, we're going to decrease the chance of an athlete experiencing low energy availability. Now, second to that, we also have to remember that without enough recovery, our body can't really put that fuel to work, so to speak. So if your athlete is sleeping less than 7 hours a night, she's going to be in a high state of stress. So that means some of that energy is going to go to other sources, such as her brain, to help it stay alert because she hasn't experienced the amount of sleep that she needs to allow that brain to function optimally. Second to that, we have to look at, I like to call it an epidemic of overscheduling. And that's when we have game practice after game practice, or we have girls that are going from sport practice into a club practice, like really right back to back, and we're not allowing for rest days. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of research demonstrating how much rest days we actually need, but that's because it's really going to be variable to the individual. Bodies are very good at adapting. So if we slowly increase someone's work capacity, she's probably going to only need maybe one rest day a week. Versus if you have an athlete that all of a sudden signs up for every single sport in the world and wants to play it all the time, she's going to be what we call overscheduled, meaning her body does not have time to use that fuel to actually repair all those little micro injuries. So that's where we're going to see her body continue to break down because you have not allowed that time for recovery. So, simply put, when it comes to how do we, what is going to impact these menstrual cycle irregularities, we can't look at body mass size. Instead, we have to look more of the acute situation. So, how much work is this athlete doing? How much is she eating? What is the frequency in which she's eating over time? What does her sleep look like? And what does her schedule look like in terms of what is her rest and how much sport or skill practice is she engaging in per week? We can compare this to her age, or we can really compare this to what she's been doing in prior years, because we only really want to see a 10% increase over the course of months or years in terms of training load. If we have too much of a spike and it's not matched with enough recovery, our athletes are in a state of breakdown, our body's go into recovery or into survival mode. And this is when we see this downregulation of really essential things such as the menstrual cycle.